Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow, and perhaps even check out our Patreon. And welcome back to episode 6 of the Building a Modular Railway Challenge. And by the time that you guys watch this, we will be at Statfold setting up, ready for the weekend ahead. Which means that some of us have got an awful lot to do. And this series is sponsored by our friends over at Grange & Hodder, who supplied us with all of the boards that you'll see in this series. They make an amazing variety of baseboards, which takes the stress and anxiety out of making a solid start for your model railway. So go check out the website, it's over in the video description, and see some of the things that they make. This episode is also sponsored by our friends over at L-Cut Creative, who make a simply stunning array of high detail kits for multiple of scales, including 00 and N. They really do have to be seen to be believed, are easy to put together, and have a wonderful high level of detail. Just look at that. So a big thanks for them for helping out with this project, and go to their website to see the sheer variety of kits available. So I felt the best thing that I could do with my time would be to further butcher my board. So all of this here needs to come off because the water's going to be about that height, and I think it will look stupid if it's just sat behind this, so time to get the jigsaw and remove it. Now, by this point, most people would say, Lawrie, don't you think really you should be concentrating on doing your scenery now rather than butchering your baseboard more? And to those people I say, this is part of the scenery. And with the section removed, I can get the Dremel out and smooth all of it off and make it look a bit less hacked. However, this all turned out to be a bit too much for my Dremel, and I went through several sanding bits, but eventually I'd got it to a stage that was good enough to go and put the next layer of papier-mâché onto the board. With the first, it had just been get the thing covered and try and mould the landscape, but this time I was trying to orientate all the strips in the same direction to give it strength, and then with the next one I would do a different direction. And whilst I was waiting for that to dry, I figured I might as well get out the rail grime. And for those of you who don't know, this is a spray paint which is, well, grimy coloured, which you apply direct to your rails and track like this, and it gives it all a nice, well, grimy texture. You could go through all of this and do it manually and weather your track like that, but frankly I find this is a much more time effective way. I had been told that the best thing I could do would be to mask off all of my rails, but I realised that just wiping them afterwards was actually pretty time effective as well. And with that on, I've got nothing else to do apart from wait for things to dry. So let's go check in on Loz and see how he's doing with his windows.
Another window done. Now that the windows have dried, or the glue has dried holding onto the plastic, it's time to cut them all out. This is a job that is actually not as bad as I thought it would be. It's still not fun.
Leaving Loz to figure out how to use a knife properly, I took a step back and looked at my handiwork and was genuinely quite impressed. This was starting to look like a landscape.
So, as well as having a play, there's actually a real reason for testing this now. And that is to make sure the power actually works at the feeds down here, and the feeds over there, because I actually haven't tested this yet.
Which meant that it was time to plug it into the other plugs and see if they worked as well.
So just like that, it functions. It works from both ends, and that is very exciting for me, that it now has a functioning feed both ends. So the scenics might not be done, the track might not line up, but I can connect it to the rest of the modules and it will feed power, and that's the most important thing.
And thus, a rigorous session of testing began. And I think on this little island here, there's going to be just a little tree. And it's going to be nice. So it'll be hopefully surrounded by water and just be a tree. Maybe some other trees over there. And as I carried on with my testing regime, I suppose it's time to go and see how Dave is getting on, because we haven't heard from him in a while. And I assume everything is going absolutely fine and he's making good progress.
It's not great, but it's also not horrendous. My soldering skills are horrendous, I'll tell you that for now. Because one of these connections, yeah, the rails don't line up properly with any of the others. If it was a pair that had screwed up and they were approximately in similar position, a screw up in about the same amount in opposite directions, I'd run them as a pair. Can't do that. Just cannot do that.
Leaving Dave to overcome his problems, I was continuing my testing. Whoops. My board still wasn't dry, so let's check back in with Loz.
Okay, so now I am weathering the inside of the workshop, which is just a simple matter of made up a little black wash, which is just some black acrylic paint and water, and then just sort of roughly putting it in, and then anywhere where I think it might be a little too much, just with a bit of kitchen roll, just wiping away the excess. And eventually, it should look more sort of old and grimy and a bit sort of, well, weathered.
Meanwhile, I decided that I had to do something constructive whilst the paper mache dried, and I had this jetty to build to go on the layout. So I figured it would be a good thing to get that assembled and ready so that when I had done the scenics, it would be able to go on. And fairly soon, I'd got all the components cut out and ready. And yes, that is a Dalek you see.
I am absolutely in awe of what we can get 3D printed now. So a little Dalek who is going to be completely underwater down here. It's amazing. So you can't have a water space without an abandoned trolley in it. I couldn't find a trolley, so we're going to have just that laying in there.
Obviously, being 3D prints, they came unpainted, so my first job was to give Barry the Dalek a new coat of paint. And then I started on the underground rail-mounted loader. And whilst I was busying myself with this, let's check back on Dave.
I want to give up, but this needs to be done. But I want you to listen. That sounded rather good, considering it's just gone over 3 joints.
By the time I'd finished painting and assembling bits of scenery, the board was dry enough for me to apply another layer of papier-mâché. But you guys don't want to watch me doing the entire board, so let's go and see how Loz was getting on.
With the platform walls now painted and the supports on them, they are taped into position temporarily so that we can just double check and make sure they have reasonable clearance to the rolling stock, which they do. And so now I can start gluing them in place using the super glue.
As I was once again waiting for the main board to dry, I made a start on the dropout section, which is the railway that runs through my mine, giving it a coat of paint and then chucking some flock on top of it just like that. And after a bit more finesse, I had something I was relatively happy with and covered it in a mix of PVA and water. And just like me, Dave and Becca were working on their scenery as well, although they were significantly further ahead and had broken out the static grass applicator to do the final touches across their layout, which compared to where I was actually rather sickening. Whilst I had the bottom off the mine scene, it gave me an opportunity to do a bit more to the scenics there, including adding an additional piece in here to help with the optical illusion that the mine goes on, because at the moment, if you look through the view hole, it was just ending. I also started to measure up pieces to cover up some of the wood, and having got my size, cut it to the correct shape. Now, lots of you will be saying, Lawrie, that's a stupid way to hold a saw, and you know what? Yep, it is. And having gone and patched up the wound and got a plaster, I could then attach my newly cut piece of plaster. And whilst that glues, let's go check in with Charles.
I have just spent, well, I did a test bit earlier, just to make sure that I'm not an idiot. Turns out I'm not quite an idiot. And then sprayed all of this with the slippery grime stuff, so it kind of tones it all down. From the edge, you can see, gets rid of most of that shine. So what I now need to do is spray the rest of it, but the time I had to scrape off all the top of these rails I thought was too long. It took me like half an hour to clean this bit up. So instead I spent an hour and a half taping off the tops of the rails so that I have to do less work. I know, I'm a genius. I can hear it sometimes as well. All over the sides of the rails and the sleepers, just to get everything weathered down a little bit and to make sure that the point contacts don't get filled with rubbish. I've done that. Hopefully my points will still work after this. Who knows?
Admittedly, Charles's technique was a little bit more finessed and correct than my just put the finger on the trigger and hope for the best. And it probably is going to give him significantly better results than what I've got. But never mind.
I don't think it comes across in video, but this was a bit of a mistake to do it all in one go. I can hardly see the other side of the room. It stinks, and I don't want to be in here anymore. So I'm going to go inside.
Being one step ahead of Charles and already applied my sleeper grime, I had now moved on to putting the ballast down. In typical Lawrie fashion, I'd just thrown a load of it on top of the rails and was now using a paintbrush to sweep away the stuff that I didn't want. Once I got the worst of it away, I could start positioning it with the paintbrush to make sure my sleepers were clear. And this took a load of time. This was a very painful experience. And the worst thing about this was, as soon as you thought you were done, you'd notice there was one stray piece of ballast and you'd go to move that, which then meant you'd move something else and it would just tumble. But eventually, it was all done and I could take a step back and look at my ballast railway.
So, as you can see, after I ballasted the track, I got a bit carried away. It had always been my plan to have a small hill section here, with the mine entrance here, going down a little ladder here, to the underground section. And I thought, I don't really have enough time to make this happen, but then last night, as I was ballasting, I was like, I'm going to go for it anyway. So, oh god.
Extra workload aside, it was now time to put another layer of papier-mâché down on my board, which was exciting because I was slowly starting to make some progress. I was making an effort to make sure to change the orientation every time I put a new layer on to get a nice honeycomb structure going on to hopefully make the thing stronger. Once I completed doing the board, I could go and put the first layer onto my new mountain mine entrance structure, which will make it look a bit more like it's meant to be there rather than just some building bricks that got left behind. And whilst I struggle with that, let's see what Loz is struggling with.
Okay, with the windows now cut out, we can put them in the window holes of the shed. Now, they don't quite fit right. You can get them most of the way in, but not quite. So all that needs doing is, with a little bit of sandpaper, just taking a little bit around off of each edge. And if they are particularly bad fitting, which I think this one's okay, there you go. Using the craft knife, just take off a little bit more if you need a little bit more than just the sandpaper taken off. And then once they fit, just a little bit of glue and glaze again around the edge of the window frame, and that'll stick it in.
And as I waited for the latest layer to dry, I'd kept myself busy.
I'm in the kitchen, what am I making? Yes, that's right, more stuff to go on the layout. I'm moulding.
And whilst things were going well for me, the same couldn't be said for Dave.
My module should have ended up almost 2 metres long. I've got to shorten that now, because as I was just getting things set up so that I could actually use the alignment board, making sure that the individual bits of track that I still need to fully fix down were in the right place, I had to put both halves of the bridge into the right place so that I could make sure that everything was working fine. 2 things happened. Number 1, a chunk of clay that I was using to act as the base for the bridge, making it a concrete bridge in the end, decided it did not wish to stay attached to the base I was using. And number 2, there's the half of the bridge that I'm not using anymore. The section of clay came out from down there. But yeah, number 2, you'll notice I'm currently holding the black wire in my fingers. The end of said black wire has a bit of copper tape around it. That copper tape used to connect through to that little bit of copper there, because that is another bit of copper tape. I have no way of fixing that. The clay has gone off. I cannot lift the track out to repair this. My module is shrinking, and there's nothing I can do about it.
As a result of being 50% of a bridge down, David now needed to modify his baseboards for this new shorter length, which is really not what he wanted to be doing at this point. Meanwhile,
Well, here we go. How is it doing? Well, it's dry. It's pretty strong. So,
That's as good as it's going to get.
I mean, realistically, I'd like at least another week of putting more layers on this. This has now got 6 on it, which is the bare minimum of what I thought I'd need. So, it's going to do. There's a bit of strength to it. It's not like I'm putting anything heavy on it, right? Like, resin's not heavy, right?
Well, it's time. Here we go. This was a huge moment for me. It finally felt like I was making some real progress. So it turns out, what I didn't realise is this is gloss. So that meant a trip out to the big orange supermarket, and whilst I browsed the paints, I wonder if Nick was having better luck.
Now, going back to my trusty reference book, but there are 3 buildings in the real version of Outwell Basin Depot, so I need 3 buildings.
And whilst Nick set to work recreating the buildings from this image, I was ready to make a second attempt with painting.
This is by no means the correct paint to be using, but literally it's the only thing in it which I could find that was brown and matte.
So it was time to spray my layout and finally make some progress. Again, and hopefully this would be a more suitable colour. That's what I appear to have done, is painted this red, whereas the cap shows brown. I'm hoping it's going to dry in a more... I mean, it looks kind of brown on the camera. To my eye out here, it's just burgundy. And whilst I waited to work out what colour the paint was going to dry, Charles had navigated the fumes and returned to his shed.
So you may have noticed that currently it's a station building without platforms. Got a building back there, but the platforms haven't yet been put in. Now, I haven't filmed any of making these because I had no idea what I was doing and I was guessing the entire time, but little bits of platform have been made. They are foam core, 4 sheets of 5mm foam core with some Slater's plasticard brick cut down to sheets put along the outside edges of them, and they have been made up into the large sections, some of which have got a little bit of imperfections, but I'm quite happy with it for the most part. And the next stage of building these platforms, once they're down, will actually fix these problems. But the card by itself is quite a plain colour. If you can't kind of really see because of how I've perfectly stood it in the light, but it's quite a plain colour. So we'll get it painted to look a bit more like stone, and maybe it'll look half decent. We can but hope. That's the first side of the first platform with its first colour done. So we're just giving it a slight different grey just to make it look a little bit more kind of stone-like I'm looking for the platform. And then this will be the base colour with which we will make it look like it's well used and weathered in once this is all dried out. But first of all, I've now got the 2 for the other side, and then once it's finished drying, the other end of this platform here.
And whilst Charles had been busy doing that, I'd been busy too installing this, which is effectively a pond liner for my board made from cling film. Now I appreciate this is not the way to do it.
And hopefully what this is going to do is seal and make a nice non-leaky level, so I can pour my water on the top of this and it won't leak everywhere, hopefully.
First up, some fine sand, and next up some more coarse sand with bits in it. And then, like a master tea blender, I seamlessly blended the two together, so you can't even tell there's 2 types of sand. Okay, so very definitely can tell, but it makes a relatively realistic looking riverbed, and I'm actually pretty happy with that. And then I sprayed it all with PVA and water mix and hopefully seal it all in to make it a nice non-leaky base. And whilst I've been waiting for other things to dry, I've given these guys another coat of earth shade. It's a wash anyway, and it makes it all look a bit more grubby. So the Dalek is going to go thus, the cage is going to go there-ish, and the boat's going to go somewhere. And whilst I'd been making grand plans, Charles had been busy.
Now I got very overeager and forgot to set the camera up. However, platforms are in, the edges are painted and weathered, and actually I'm pretty happy with them. They look very nice. And you will also note that there is a bunch of ballast chucked down because I got so excited I literally did 4 separate jobs and forgot about the camera in its entirety. So, yeah, did a good job.
And let's see. Perfect. Cooked to perfection. For my mine scene, I needed rocks. I'd got this nice plaster set that allowed me to mould my own, so I was making a variety of different things to be able to coat different parts of my newly constructed mine shaft and other bits that I needed to fill in underneath the mine itself. And there's something quite satisfying about actually creating your own scenic items to go on the layout. So this is going to be my mine entrance at least, or at least one way in. So we're now putting in the back wall here. So you have the entrance just coming down there from thus, and then this bit here is the back wall, so you'll see that as your visual bit, and I need to block all this off obviously. So I've just cut out one of these ladders, and now I'm just about to try and bend this bit here over onto itself to make the top of the ladder, which I can see going totally fine. I am genuinely impressed. So that's going to go in here, hanging off there. So I've just got to cut it to the right length. That looks, oh, it's going to be so cool. So that's a trial fit of this. And then just, oh, that's going to look so good. That's going to look amazing. And we're just going to add this into here. So it's just going to sit on top of all of that. Glue onto there, and then this can drop in just like that. Going to tuck in just like that. It's going to go into there, like so. And as I was working on the big details, Dave was working on the small ones.
How are we doing, Dave?
I think overall really good. I'm currently getting some fencing done. About 30 left to cut out on this sheet, and then a second sheet with a further 90 fence posts, so getting through it.
So a lot of this now is just waiting for things to dry, like down there where it's become a pool, which is my own mistake. But some of it I'm now really starting to be very pleased with. Like, let me show you a couple of highlights. I love my sunk boat that's got a little bit of sand coming through, and I love my buried, it's not a shopping trolley, but just the trolley. Every river needs a trolley in it. I'm very pleased with that. I don't like the fact this has gone red more than brown. And I have a Dalek who is slowly starting to dry. Now, most people are aware that if you pour a liquid in something and there's no container for it, it won't stay where you want it to. That's kind of part of it being a liquid. And as you've seen, I've removed the side of my board that would have contained a liquid. So how am I going to fix this? Well, what I've done is I've reinstated the bit that I've cut off. Yes, and I brought my plastic liner up along the edge of it, so that will be waterproof. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this is actually a work of genius. All I've got to do is wait for all of this to go off, because I'm pretty sure if I put the stuff down with it being wet, it will all go cloudy.
It wasn't good news for everybody though.
You can see the state my board's in. I am not anywhere near ready, but I hope I should be okay.
With the alignment module in his possession, David was able to relay his track to suit his board's new configuration and get it all fitted down. Meanwhile, I was really pleased with the modelling I'd achieved. I've just installed the ladder and I'm so pleased with that. This looked amazing, even if I do say so myself. Right, so here we go. Man attached the ladder and then just touch around there. Second man there, so he'll be hidden there. It was about this time I decided that I wasn't happy with the colour of the baseboard, so I returned to B&Q to select more paint. And once I'd got some nice green paint and a new paintbrush, once again painted the board for the third time. It also meant that I could paint my new structure that hadn't been there the last time I put paint on the board. Whilst I was at B&Q, I also bought some grey paint to use on the side to make it look a bit earthy in the side of a mountain like. And whilst I was in a painting mood, I thought I might as well get on and start painting all of the rock formations inside the mine. I was using a technique that Woodland Scenics called leopard painting, which is you put a load of spots of one of two secondary colours and then a load of spots of the other secondary colour. And once you've covered everything in these spots, you have something that, well, doesn't really look like a set of rocks at all. But then you put the primary colour over the top of everything, and this thing is obviously magic, because it makes it like this. And there we are. Now I am over the moon with that. I think that's great. The final little surprise. Yes.
The next thing that I have to do for my modules is the very slight task of completing the wiring on the undersides of the board and then into the control panel. Now, I've started some plans, realised that they're probably wrong, so I started this list instead. And then once I've got the two boards done, then we've got to wire up this, which is my brilliant control panel I got laser cut at work, because if you've got access to one, why not play with it? But I've got a lot of wires to work out, because everything that's on the board currently is pretty much only stuff that's connected to the rails. I've already made the little attachment bits for the controllers to plug into. They've just got a power in, power out feed. So they're going to get mounted in the sides of the board and then have wires that take them off to the actual controllers themselves. So that's reasonably simple. Hence the reason I started with them, to ease myself into the wiring chaos that I've caused myself. But then we've got to get all of these droppers sorted out. I've got two separate sections to do the wiring in, plus two separate districts, because one goes up line and then I've got down line as well. So I've got to be able to switch between them with the isolation, got to get it all wired in, got to get it working through the connectors, depending on how many wires there are. Got the accessory bus to pass through as well. So there's only a few weeks left. I am cutting it a bit close with this stage because I've been putting this off while doing all the other bits, because I've been dreading doing this, to be perfectly honest, because the more and more I've been working through things and putting wires through things and working out what's going where, the worse it's getting. Because obviously this is only droppers off the track. There's droppers off the track, there's the power bus, there's signals to go through. I've still got to wire in any accessories that need power feeds, like lights or anything like that. I've got to wire up the entire control panel. I've got to sort out the isolation, actually finish wiring up all of the points motors, because currently they've only got their frog feed attached to all of them. I've started putting a couple of wires in some of them as tests and marking which sockets are which, but for the most part, there's a lot to do.
And whilst Charles struggled, I was doing more scenics. It's all looking pretty good. I was feeling pretty smug until I saw just how far Nick had got on.
And with a few days to go, this is where we're at. So, trees, I did make them too big. I'm not happy with them. I'm going to either remake them or go and buy some. We've got our grounded coach body in. It wasn't the one I was planning on, but I am happy with that. We've got one tree in. We've got all the buildings in place. And my favourite little thing is the flickering barrel. I just love that thing.
So overnight, my flock did not take very well at all. So it's time to break out the big guns because it's still wet. And literally, guns. So I wasn't overly happy with how this was looking. A, because a load of it fell off overnight, and B, the fine turf soil turns out to be green and not black like I'd expect for soil. So I found a can of black spray paint and I've given all of it a hearty coating, and now it looks like what I wanted, the inside of a mountain with the coal going through. And it's all black, so that's fine. You've got a bit of other stuff in there to break it up, but you can see where the coal is because it's coaly.
So for my electronics, for board 2 at least at the moment, I am in the process of sorting out a little board to put the electrics on. So I'm making some spacers that will sit on top of this bit here, then the board will sit on top of this, and then I can start screwing all of my components to that rather than having to go to the board, mainly because I haven't got any screws that are only 5mm thick, because that's how thick this is. So the smallest screw I seem to have is 30mm, which obviously goes through a fair amount. So I'm just making something that basically spaces the majority of the screw so it's hidden, and also then gives me a large flat surface that I can put all of my electronics and labels and things onto that I need to. I'm playing with power tools.
So this is the big moment. Everything kind of hinges on this magic stuff making a nice river.
I think all of that is dry. I think it's sealed. So I need to read the instructions very carefully. I'm so scared. So I literally have, at this point, it's just a few days to the show, so this has to work. And once the water's gone in, then I can work out the rest of it. So I'm not so worried about doing the rest of the scenics, because it's all basically there. It's just grass and trees. But this, have to have this in and done tonight. Oh, wow. Oh, I misunderestimated how much you get in this. Oh no. Oh, that's not gonna do much of this. Having built my foil hat to keep out the TV waves controlling my mind. Now let's cover this once I put the stuff in. Right, into the water we go. This was a bowl of warm water to heat both the resin and the activator for 15 minutes. And when that was up, well, then it was time to mix the two together for 10 whole minutes. I'd also added a few drops of blue tint to this, with the idea to make it look like it's a nice summer's day and everything's reflecting off it. I might have put too little in, but I'd rather have too little than too much. But soon, it was time to pour, the most important part of my layout coming together, and I was terrified. And as the resin goes down, that's where we're going to leave this episode. Let me know in the comments below if you think it's going to work, and we hope to see you guys at the Statfold Barn Model Railway show this Saturday and Sunday, and join us next time to see the final part of the layout build and how it all goes together at the show itself. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, then there's other episodes coming on the screen now, and a video showing you what the Statfold Barn Model Railway show was like last year. So, we'll see you there, guys. Come up, say hello, look forward to meeting all of you, and wish me luck. Let us know in the comments below if you think it's going to make it as well. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Ta-da!